Hello, once again, folks. Welcome to Thinking Out Loud. My name is Fran Mendez, and one more week I'm here with you to have a chat about open source, async KPI, and let's see, who knows? Like our next our guest today is probably, if not her, probably what's her job, let's say, is probably well known in the open source community. So I'm super proud to have the honor to have a chat with her on Thinking Out Loud today. But before, as always, before I get started and I invite her to join the stage, the virtual stage, let me go through a few basic things, or things that I consider that should be basic, that we mentioned. We have enabled closed captions on YouTube only. So if you prefer or need closed captions, head over to YouTube. So it's youtube.com/asyncKPI. That's the profile. Um, and as I always say, like, I try to make Thinking Out Loud a collaborative live stream, if you want, as much as possible. So if you have any questions, any comment, you're not on the live stream, but you're in the chat. So feel free to join the conversation via chat, and I'll make sure that we read this comment or this question, and we chat about it. So yeah, don't be shy. Hey, Missy, by the way. And last but not least, so if you want to follow us, this is Async KPI spec profile on Twitter. There, if you follow us, you'll get notifications of all the things that we do, which is probably not a good thing to mention now because you're gonna get a lot of notifications. But jokes aside, I think it's a good thing. You'll actually like it. So yeah, so that's it. Let me introduce our next guest, Pia Mancini. Let me enable her video. Okay, welcome, Pia.
Hi, how are
So
you? Hi, Fran.
hey, so let me ask you something. I just said Pia Mancini. Is it Mancini? Like this
Mancini.
is like
Yeah.
Italian? Okay.
Yes. 100%
I was
Italian.
afraid. I was afraid that I was going to pronounce your name incorrectly, and I'm always afraid about names because you never know. But yeah, so welcome, and yeah, maybe you want to introduce yourself a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I am Pia Mancini. I'm co-founder and CEO of Open Collective and also co-founder of the Open Source Collective, which we can go into what on earth all of that is soon. But yeah, I am originally from Argentina. I live in Spain, in Madrid, with my husband and my 6-year-old daughter that is like literally crawling beneath me at the moment. So here we are. So Roma is around today. So apologies, everyone, but she's lovely.
No need to apologize. We actually like babies and kids on the live stream on Thinking Out Loud, and my daughter Ada makes her appearance every single Thinking Out Loud in the background, but that's completely fine.
Yeah.
So, um, so you just said, like, you just mentioned that we can chat about it. You mentioned that Open Collective and Open Source Collective. So what's the difference for those?
Yeah.
I honestly myself I'm not totally
Yeah.
clear.
Don't worry. Like no one knows. When I started this whole, when we started this whole thing, I was in charge of creating a lot of the legal entities that we use, and so everything is called open and collective, which is slightly my fault. That it's very confusing, and my comms team is not happy about that. But essentially, kind of the problem that we want to solve, that we are solving, is okay. We want to help, we want to enable communities to fundraise and spend money transparently without becoming something that they're not, right? Without becoming legal entities. So communities essentially are groups of people that have a shared purpose, a shared mission, like an open source project, right? But an open source project is like a bunch of people, it's a community and the product of their creativity, right? And the financial system or the economic system at large doesn't really understand the community with economic power. They don't understand how you can give money to something that is not something, right? That is an unincorporated group of people doing something,
Yes.
even if what they're doing is used by everyone under the sun, right? And so the problem that we want to solve is that how can we make it so that communities can successfully fundraise and spend money and pay their members without having to become, an open core kind of project or a company or a foundation, right? Because maybe that's not what they want. And so where we are coming from, both Xavier Daman, my co-founder, and myself, we had experiences trying to do. I come from politics, and so I started a political party in Argentina, for example, and we couldn't raise funds for our campaign until government told us, yes, okay, you are like a valid political party, right? And we always felt it was so unfair because it's like the ultimate gatekeeping, right? You can't fundraise until you become what we say is okay to be, and that's where we're coming from. We're coming from like this kind of experience in how unfair it is that the system is forcing us to be triangles, to when we're circles, right? We're
Mhm.
not a corporation. We don't have hierarchical structures. We don't want like a president. We just want to be able to do what we do, which is what we love and has impact in the world, right? And we want to be left alone to do it as much as humanly possible. Um, and so Open Collective is a two-part solution for that problem. On the one hand, you have the Open Collective platform. That is the platform that communities use to raise funds, manage their money, pay their contributors, create events, have like this minimal organizational structure. The platform is built and developed by a company called Open Collective Inc., right? That is the company that I co-founded and I'm the CEO of. But then the other part of the solution is where is the money going to, right? We need a pot where to put the money. So
Mhm.
a company wants to give money to an open source project. That open source project doesn't have a business bank account that a company can speak to, right? So the open source collective, which is a nonprofit, is providing the bank account, right? It's providing the
Mhm.
fiscal sponsorship, the compliance, etc. And so that's kind of the two-part solution: the platform plus the nonprofit, where you put the money. And Open Collective is what I like to call a constellation, right? Because it's like a gazillion different things at the same time. But at the core is a network that is made up of a platform that is developed by the company and a network of more than 300 nonprofits around the world, right, that are giving
Yeah.
these services to collectives, because it's not just the open source ecosystem, it's also the solidarity economy, it's also Europe, it's also Africa and New Zealand, right? So we have like many different fiscal hosts that we call them, that are providing this essential service, essentially a place where a community can successfully put the money.
Yeah. So
That was
that is that was the short answer, by the way.
yes.
No, just kidding. But um, actually, I was going to mention that part about the fiscal hosts, because when I first knew about Open Collective, I was like, uh, yeah, that's cool. I can sign up here, maybe create my project, but um, what's gonna happen next? Like how can I get a bank account? How can I receive money? Um, Precisely because of this that you're mentioning, I was like highly stressed. I had people um, telling me in private, in large email chains, telling me that we want to give you money, we want to pay you, but I wasn't a company, and I was just an employee in a company, and and I was always thinking like, should I quit and create my own company? And if so, I'm gonna start receiving a lot of money. that is not really a payment; it's a donation. So I will have to handle this kind of fiscality, and I have no idea how to do it, and that's a lot of complexity. And I was like, I'm just a developer. Can I like, I don't want to be doing this. Can I just continue developing, and you give me the money, and everybody shuts up? Like, can't we
Exactly.
just do this? I'm not gonna do anything weird with the money. Just living, right? I need it for living. And I was initially was thinking that, and then the other solution came to mind, and it's like, I'm gonna then create a foundation. um, but then there are lots of things to take into account. For instance, I live in Spain, so where do I create the foundation? In Spain? um, if so, if I create a foundation in Spain, then I have problems. I have troubles because most companies in the US will not want to donate to a Spanish foundation. um, they want to donate to a US foundation, so they can, um, how's it called? Like, they can, at the end of the fiscal year, they can just, well, I'm gonna use our Spanish, deducir,
Ah,
dedu-
deduct. Yeah,
deduct, yeah, deduct.
from
So yeah,
taxes.
so oh, it's super handy to have
Yeah.
you here that you can speak Spanish. So I usually cannot do this. So yeah, they can deduct at the end of the fiscal year, like, you know, that they donated to a foundation. So yeah, and they all want to do it. So yeah, and then it's like, okay, so should I create it on the US? Uh, okay, how do I start creating a foundation in the US? It's freaking complicated.
Like, wow.
Um, and,
Yeah.
and at the end of, I mean, in the middle of all this process, I was like, I just want to develop async KPI. I don't want to create a foundation or a company. Can like I just said, right? So yeah, that was that's when I understood that you're providing also the fiscal host, and I was like, no, I can't believe it. I can't believe this is real. Like, there must be some kind of weird thing that the, like, at the end, that which is like the IRS in the US is going to come after me because I'm doing something illegal or something, like,
Totally daunting and also inefficient. Like, why
yes.
should you be focusing on, I always make the joke that, like, why should you be talking to accountants and lawyers? Like, I have nothing against accountants and lawyers, but it's hard to argue that that's where we should be spending our time, right?
Exactly. I have nothing against them, but I don't want to become one. Right?
Exactly.
That's the thing. So that's why we have accountants and lawyers. Let them do their job, and let me do my job, and let's all work together happily. But yeah, before Open Collective, it was, I would say, it was almost impossible, if not impossible. So yeah, I was super glad that the project got accepted, and then assigned a fiscal host, which, by the way, it was assigned the US fiscal host, because at that time I think the European one wasn't in place yet. So yeah, and and that is something that I also want to mention. Um, the European fiscal host. I want to make a shout out to the European fiscal host from
They're
here,
the best.
to Jeff specifically, right, for all the help that we received. So those who are watching maybe don't, some know and some don't know, but last year we created a campaign. I mean, like, Lucas and I created a campaign to help the Afghanistan folks to escape from war. And after a bunch of trial and error with different platforms, we realized, like, Open Collective maybe, like we're complicating our lives. We're already doing this. Like, Open Collective might tweet this thing, right? And then I reach out to you, and then Jeff um, reply saying, like, hey, I can help. So yeah, and the rest of history, like, like, Kuda could happily come with escape from the war with his family, which, by the way, he's on the chat. He's watching us. So hey, Kuda. and yeah, and also another family as well. So Ahmad. So yeah, really cool. And yeah, before I forget,
Mhm.
um, before I forget, I want to play a recording. So I asked questions while like the days before this live stream. I asked people to record their questions or to leave questions in the tweet, right, in Twitter, so that I could ask you,
Okay.
right. So Kuda left a question, by the way. So he didn't record it, but he let me just try to make it work. Okay, so I can show it to you. So yeah, so as one of the beneficiaries of an open collective campaign for Afghanistan's OSS developers during the war, I have seen firsthand how vital the rule of platforms like Open Collective can be. I was wondering what has been the role of Open Collective to help communities in other humanitarian crises like the war in Ukraine.
Yeah. Hi, Kuda. Hope you're well. Thank you for your question. So yeah, I mean, we're doing a big effort for the Ukrainian relief, the solidarity effort. So what we are doing is we are helping. We're enabling fundraising for a project. So we're doing several things, but I would say that the largest one is like we are essentially sending $1,000 to a family in Ukraine per family, right? And we've so far deployed $3 million. So that's a lot of families that we were able to fund with the 1K project. What I really like about Open Collective is kind of the flexibility that we have. Like as you were saying, it's really difficult to start a project or a foundation because once you started, like what if you wanted to stop, you need to shut it down, and sometimes it's harder to shut things down than to start new ones, right? It's like really difficult because you have to close it, and there's a ton of paperwork. So ugh. So the 1K project was a project that started during COVID. During COVID, we had a zero fee, like offer. I don't know how to call it, like zero fees for all COVID projects, right? It was our contribution to the world. We are all in the same boat here. So if you are raising money for COVID for, I think we ended up doing up to 6 months, we're not going to charge any fees on the money that you fundraise, right? So we started in March 2020. Um, and so 1K project was one of the projects that came on board during that wave. And they were giving $1,000 during 3 months, so $1,000 each month to one family or per family for COVID relief, right? Folks who couldn't go to work, workers from the hospitality industry, the art world, who are losing their ability to support themselves and their families. And so after a while, that project just died down, right? They did a big relief effort. And then, and there was no zero hassle, like zero, right? The collective was archived, all the money was accounted for. We had all the transactions. It was just simple. It took like 10 minutes. And then when the war in Ukraine started, the founder of 1K Project obviously turned around and he's like, hey, can we use this again? And I'm like, out you go. And so that same day, we were already fundraising for the Ukraine relief effort, right? And that kind of really lightweight and flexible structure that Open Collective
Yeah.
provides, I think is what we need in the world, because we don't want to create structures and just keep them around just because they're already here. That just creates clutter and noise, and it's not sustainable and pollutes. So so yeah, I'm really proud of that one, and so we are. That's probably our biggest Ukraine effort. Then Open Collective Europe is supporting a couple of projects in Ukraine. One that is working to protect Ukrainian like art heritage. Another one that is it's Black Women for Ukraine, and it's a group of Black women who. So when the first humanitarian corridors were created in Ukraine, and a lot of students were um, taken out of Ukraine, there was this really awful situation where black students were left like at the end of the queue, so to say. And because the Russians were still shelling at that time in that place, like a lot of them couldn't even be rescued, right? So Black Women for I think it's Black Women for Ukraine, the name of the collective. It's like fundraising for like essentially getting black students out of Ukraine. Um, many efforts of like that. We have obviously a zero fee in Open Collective Europe for Ukraine as well. We are like, I don't know, working round the clock, but yeah, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, that is.
Something else, Fran, that I think is worth mentioning for Ukraine is like the open source developers in the open source collective. Um, they came together and they created a fund that is like open source for Ukraine. So they use their collective budget, their budgets on Open
Mhm.
Collective, to put money in a fund. And from that fund, we made donations to organizations on the ground in Ukraine. Yeah.
That is no, that is really cool. By the way, Kuda is thanking for answering. I mean, thanks Kuda for asking the question in the first place. So I was as you were speaking about it, I was thinking like, um, that it's like we go by chapters. Like now it's Afghanistan war, now it's Ukraine, or COVID, and then Ukraine, or like chapters, right? But we don't close the chapters. We
Mm.
just jump to another thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'm making myself understandable, but what I mean here is that we kind of put the focus in something. We all go like, oh, let's help these people, and then it's like after some time, it's like, no, these people are fine already. Let's move to this other thing,
Yeah.
something else. Right now, it's Ukraine, which I'm not obviously, and I want this to be clear. Like, I'm not criticizing those who are helping Ukrainian people, of course not. But I mean, we are helping ourselves personally, like my team and the people I know. We're also help, like, as much as we can. We're also helping financially and helping in other ways as well. So the thing here is that um, I have the feeling, and I don't know if you have the same feeling as well, that we kind of forget about stuff, like nobody's looking at Afghanistan anymore,
Sure.
and the problem is not over. Actually,
Yeah.
it's getting worse.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm laughing because, yeah, I can't believe it, but it's not funny. But recently I heard about this news that women cannot now go to school or university and so on, so they have no rights for education. And now they have to start, they have to, they cannot go out uncovered, right? So so yeah, so it's still it's still a problem. It's still, the problem persists. Of course, nobody's bombing anymore. I mean, I hope nobody's bombing anymore. But I have the feeling that media is also like driving us in one way or another, and we forget about this humanitarian crisis.
Yeah.
And not just, I mean, not want to. I don't want to criticize or anything. Just want to mention that I have
No, but it's
sometimes this feeling that
but it's also, you know what, friends, also it's an effect obviously of media. Like at least here in Spain, like COVID was like, you know, top of the newspaper like day after day after day after day, and now it's gone. You know, it's like COVID, and they're like, what? Because of course they have something else that is driving sales and clicks, which is the war
yes.
in the invasion of Ukraine. But it's also we're also human, and this is also an effect of empathy. Like what happens, in your brain when you feel empathy for someone else is that everything else like seems to be less important, right? It's like
Mhm.
when you have high empathy for something, that is the only thing you can focus on, that you care about, right? And so sometimes it's this kind of, we lack perspective, or we can't, I don't know, it's like the bandwidth is like can only handle so much, right? And
Yeah.
so Yeah. Um, we also need to understand that we are human, and there's so much we can cope with. I have to say,
Yeah,
at any given
actually,
time.
I just mentioned COVID, Ukraine, and Afghanistan war, and so on. But there are many
Like,
more things happening.
exactly. It's like the
Of
war in
course,
Yemen,
yeah,
hunger, and
exactly,
yeah.
yeah. So there are many more things happening. And actually, I got people um, when we started helping Afghanistan open source contributors, and also in the, I think, KPI Slack, people started a campaign to help Ukrainian people. Um, I started receiving private messages people from people saying like, "Hey, why don't you help other people, other countries?"
Yeah.
It's like Yemen was one of them. Like it's been it's been there for a while,
Yes.
or Palestinians, for instance, like with Israel and so on. Like why don't you position yourself on in any of those? And it's like what you said. Like it's just a human brain can only cope with a few things, and that's it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and also media is driving a lot of these things. So
Yeah.
that's also for sure.
Mm.
Which takes me to another thing. I have three questions for you, by the way, from
Okay.
people. So
Cool. Thank you.
like people seem to be excited to ask you questions,
Okay,
and
that's great.
that's you may not know this woman, but I don't know. Let me know if you know this woman. Um,
So for
so,
everyone who doesn't get the joke, Alana is Open Collective's COO and Open Collective Foundation's executive director. We've been working together for many years. So yeah.
so yeah, so she's asking like, what kind of world are you trying to create for Roma? So Roma is her daughter, right? So yeah, to grow up in, and how does being a parent impact your work?
Hmm. So okay, so let's start with the easy one. How does it impact my work? So when I started, I joined my co-founder Xavier on Open Collective when Roma was, I think, not even 2 months old. So I didn't know what it was to be a mother, or I didn't know what it was to like run a startup. Um, so I was like new to it all. I don't recommend it, but it also gave me um, like a sense of like no bullshit. I didn't have time. I still don't have time
Yeah.
for bullshit. And I guess parenting does that to you. You have like a very acute sense of how you're spending your time, and you want to be kind of very efficient, and it keeps you focused, right? Because the time you're spending away from your family is time that you want to use properly, especially in those, at first, in those first couple of years when you can barely sleep. Now Roma is older. She's like almost, she's gonna be 7 in November. She's 6.5. And so now it's like, I don't know, it's different. She's in school, But but I guess the first thing that it impacted was that. Um, and then it impacted how we created Open Collective, because like I had to work from home because we were living in San Francisco at the time. We obviously didn't have any money for childcare. Childcare in San Francisco is like ridiculously expensive. Everything in San Francisco is like insane.
That, like, does it even exist? I haven't seen
Well, to be honest,
children in San Francisco.
it's
Never. It's something
different.
that impacted
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
I
it's
never seen
crazy.
children there in the streets.
Yeah, and so Open Collective from the get-go was created as a remote company, right? And that I think was, it made us who we are in a way, because we never had headquarters, we never had offices, so we could always hire from anywhere in the world. So we have folks from British Columbia and Canada all the way to New Zealand, like stopping in every continent. So it's a scheduling madness, but it also made us like at the core understand the problem that we were trying to solve, right? Which is also
Yeah.
a problem of like, how do you increase collaboration and how do you increase the sharing of value in a completely distributed or decentralized way, right? um, and so I guess like that also had to do with me being like a new mother when everything started to come together. um, and I guess that the world that I would like to create for Roma, it's the first thing that comes to mind is a world that doesn't need passports, right?
Hmm.
Roma is like, this is gonna sound weird in maybe this community, but she's a blockchain baby. Like, we certified her birth on the Bitcoin blockchain back in November 2015. Because, and that was like, a mix of like my husband being like a crypto head, but also myself being like from, politics, and really wanting to build structures outside of nation states, right? And so it was this idea that the institutions that we have are a construct, they're an agreement. That the United States exists is an agreement that we all hold, right?
Yeah.
It's an institution that was created at a point in time, and we all agree that it exists, right? Obviously it's not like an active consensus because we're born into this kind of system, but at the end of the day it's a social construct. That's what it is. Nations are like a social construct. um, and so my obsession in life beyond Open Collective has to do with building structures around nation states, because I think nation states are a political kind of entity that was created for a different society, a society that didn't have this type of communication technology. That the communication technology was the printing press, right? And so we created borders, and so we created these like structures to force this idea of nation, to be able to have a currency, to be able to do commerce, right? All of that doesn't exist as such anymore. Like, the problem is not there anymore, right? We have uh, a tool that let us communicate and collaborate at scale that is planetary, right? And so why do we still insist in being like, define our identities being defined by the territory that we're born in, that is just
Hmm.
random, or the currency that is forced upon us? I'm from Argentina, so like currency is a big thing for me. um, yeah, it's like normal people that are not Argentinians, they're like,
Corralito, corralito.
on currency. I'm like, dude, trust me.
Don't mention that word. Sorry.
I always need to explain because I get like perplexed, looks, and I'm like, we removed 13 zeros from our currency, so like, we've been paying the price. So
That's a lot.
so for Roma, like, I really wanted her to have this, or we really wanted to make the point that we wanted something else, that it was a network to be able to certify her existence before we registered her with California. She was born there. And so that for me is, um, speaks to the headspace that we have, the problem space that we really want to act into. And so for me, it's about creating structures that go around the nation state. And Open Collective has to do with that, right? Open Collective has to do with how do we abstract away the problem of, having to be somewhere in the world with your legal entity in order to receive money. Forget about that. You're like operating at a higher level of the stack, right? And the world that I wanna bring about is one where passports don't exist, where like borders don't exist as such, where we can, freely move to other cities that we want to live into and that we buy into, and
Mhm.
be represented by, groups of people or networks, and not countries, right?
Yeah,
Nations. Sorry.
yeah.
That's my, little obsession there.
That is a beautiful one, I would say, and yeah, an ambitious, an
Yeah.
ambitious one. Yeah, I don't even think it's possible because there will always be people trying to screw your plans.
It's about building
Yeah, but
alternative systems, right? It's about,
yeah,
how do you change like an existing system, right? You throw everything to the trash and you say like revolution, and everything is up for grabs. So That's one option. You change the system from within. That's a second option. We're gonna win
Mm.
elections, do a political party. We're gonna try to change a thing here or there.
Yeah.
Or you can build an alternative, right? Because no system is gonna change unless we're able to articulate an alternative to what we have. And so
Yeah.
it's not about like something that we're going to bring about tomorrow, but it's about crystallizing an idea that another way of doing things is possible, and this is how you structure it, right? And then you bring people over. So it's really about um yeah, articulating alternatives and a narrative that goes with that alternative that is viable. So that for me is a win.
I was actually thinking right now, as you were mentioning this, there are other people creating other alternatives, and they're pretty advanced,
Mm,
and we probably don't realize. And it's the companies, the like, not the companies,
of course.
the big tech companies, the big corporations, right? So they're doing exactly that.
Yeah.
They're trying to overcome states and democracies and so on.
Yeah.
So they're exactly doing this. They're creating they're creating like a parallel um, system
Exactly.
where they rule
Yeah.
basically, in this case.
It's
But
yeah, yeah. It's
so,
like the
yes,
battle between the land, which is the
yeah,
state, and the cloud, which are
exactly,
the
yeah,
tech corporations, and it's the battle for providing identity, for providing currency, for providing a sense of
mhm,
belonging, for
yeah,
grabbing your attention, right? Like
yeah,
Facebook literally wants to, be the identity provider of the
yeah.
world, the currency
Though,
provider of the
yeah,
world.
they want to become the one state, let's say,
Yeah,
the multiverse, right?
yeah,
But the multiverse is going to actually be their universe, the only universe they can control.
yeah.
So effectively, right? So it's like they call it the multiverse, but yeah, multi in this case, I don't think it's I don't, oh no, it's not the multiverse, it's the metaverse.
The
Sorry.
metaverse.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, metaverse. Yeah. I was yeah. Sorry, yeah, sorry for the confusion. Um, yeah, so as I was saying, like, I think we have people, we have corps, right? Big corps trying to um, dominate the the land. I mean, the land, the landscape of how people interact with each other, how people communicate, how people, um, like they like you said, like they feel the belonging and so on. So we already are we're already seeing this kind of patterns
Mm.
where people create an alternative reality to the one that is based on borders, on lands, and so on. And they're showing this way as well. I just don't like this alternative way, but it's it's kinda like they're doing this probably for their own purpose, for their own benefit, of course, not for the benefit of the humanity. They don't care actually, because it's a company after all.
But
So
yeah, they get it. They get that what they need to do is
yeah.
to build also crypto is doing that, and whether we like it or not, and we have a lot to say about it, and we can go,
Mhm.
deeper into this, but there's like in Web3 space, there's like there's currency, there is like an aesthetic, there is like a governance tooling, right? There is a
Mhm.
jurisdiction, which is like the planet. So they are definitely trying to say, but you have like jury systems, like Kleros, and you have like contracts and commerce. So they it's very clear to me, and it has been for a very long time, that the nation state is declining as the sole kind of
Yeah.
vector that organizes power, right? So the question is, what is the alternative going to look like? And it's probably going to be a mess, and it's probably going to be everything together, and it's very messy, and we're
Yes.
going to have like remnants of the nation states, pockets of control that they're still going to have. But what I ask myself is like, in all of this like madness, what can we what sanity can we bring? What can we do to try and make it more fair, or to try and bring a little bit of our own vision and view of the
Mhm.
world into this? Like, we are big believers in the power that communities have and the impact that communities have in the world, and we're also a big believers that the product of our work should we also share in the we should also share in the benefits of, like, the artifacts of our creativity, even if they are open, even if they are for the world, even if they're open source, right? Why shouldn't we? And so the use of the data that we generate online,
Mhm.
instead of us having to go to the APIs, right, and kind of connect to every single API, whether that's a state or a corporation, like, why can't we be, our own API, and then we give permissions for those to connect with us, right? Like this kind of personal API kind of identity vault system. So I don't know, like, what I think about, and is, what can we bring into this?
Yeah, and
Because
transparency.
exactly. Well,
And
yes.
transparency, yeah, that's a whole new thing as well. That's that's a whole thing itself. I would say, like all you mentioned, but transparently, because we can see all these things already in place, but it's lacking transparency in most cases, and that's driving me nuts. In most cases, like it is you need to be inside a circle of certain people just so you get to access to certain things, and I'm actually like feeling that now. Like now that async KPI became more popular and so on, it's super easy for me to access to certain people and have a meeting with them, and they pay attention to what I have to say and so on. Otherwise, they will never have listened to me. Um, so it's like this lack of transparency and lack of ability to reach out to people or to certain resources, not just people. It is yeah, it is not good. Definitely. And last recorded question, which is kind of related, um, from Lucas Gornitsky, who's on the chat.
Hi,
Hi,
Pia.
Pia.
First of
First of
all,
all,
what
what
Open
Open
Collective
Collective
does
does
for
for
open
open
source
source
community
community
is
is
just
just
simply
simply
amazing.
amazing.
How
How
you
you
support
support
all
all
these
these
projects
projects
to
to
get
get
funding.
funding.
And I
And I
was
was
always
always
thinking,
thinking,
Excuse me, you hear the audio doubled?
Yes,
Like
no, I
double?
hear it perfectly. Yeah.
You heard perfectly?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was hearing the audio twice. I don't know why. Then sorry, I'm gonna play it again.
and that's my
how you
question, is
support all these
projects to get
projects to get
funding.
funding.
And I was
And I
always
was always
thinking,
thinking,
and that's
and
my
that's my
question,
question.
it's gonna be
It's
pretty
gonna be
long,
pretty long
because I
because
want
I
to make
want to
sure
make sure
I make
I
myself
make
clear.
myself clear.
So I was
So I was
always
always
thinking, like,
thinking, like,
if Open
if Open
Collective
Collective
ever
ever
tried to
tried to
somehow
somehow
partner with
partner
big
with
tech.
big tech.
And what I
And
mean
what I
is,
mean is,
you hear
you
all
hear
over the
all over the
place, like it's
place,
getting
like it's getting
popular that some
popular that some
companies like
companies like
Salesforce or
Salesforce or
Netlify,
Netlify,
they
they
fund
fund
some kind
some
of
kind of
open
open
source.
source.
I think it's double for you for the streaming as well, is what I'm seeing in the chat.
Sorry, I was mute. I was saying that, yeah, like sounds like Lucas is in a megaphone. So let me just
You want
try
me to mute
something else.
myself? Maybe that will fix it.
Maybe that will be the reason. Maybe, yeah. Let's try.
Like $1 million to donate to open source. They share money with Collective does for open source community. It's just simply amazing. How you support all these projects to get funding. And I was always thinking, and that's my question. It's gonna be pretty long because I want to make sure I make myself clear. So I was always thinking, like, if Open Collective ever tried to somehow partner with big tech. And what I mean is, you hear all over the place, like it's getting popular that some companies like Salesforce or Netlify, they fund some kind of open source budgets, like $1 million to donate to open source. They advertise it everywhere that they will share money with the community because they support open source, but it's all pretty individual. Like they do this marketing lie, and but you don't see any like transparent progress on how they really support what projects, where, how they distribute money. And I like, because we truly believe at Async API as well in like in full transparency, like that's what I expect from them as well. Like if they take the credit for being cool to give away money to the projects, they should also be super transparent in the way how they really do it, if it's true that they do it. And I was thinking, like, could Open Collective be a place where big tech can do it? Like they can have this special official accounts where we can see how much money they donated, how they distribute to what projects, and it's all done in one place, because Open Collective should be this like the core platform for that. Did you ever think about it? Like, because like a lot of corporations, they already have this OSPO departments, like open source program office, where they have dedicated people responsible for setting up open source in the companies. And I bet they are responsible for these programs as well, like to distribute money. And they're grouped in this to-do organization under Linux Foundation. So like there are already names that could be contacted by Open Collective, like names from IBM, whatever, Microsoft, etc. So yeah, to summarize in short my question, like, did you ever consider it? You think it's possible, or it's actually wishful thinking? Because in the end, big tech don't care much about transparency. They're pretty afraid of transparency, especially if it comes to spending money. And I just should forget about the concept in general. Yeah. Anyway, thank you. Cheers.
Cool. Thank you, Lucas. Sorry about the sound snafu. Okay, so one part of the answer is like that is already happening for those donations on the Open Collective platform, right? If you go to opencollective.com/Chrome/Airbnb /Salesforce, you can see there all the donations, all the money that they spend on what collectives and for how long, etc. Right? So everything that kind of profile for Open Collective is already kind of a thing. What we are not getting them to do, but we haven't really pushed very hard, is for them to show other contributions that they make, right, outside of Open Collective. When we did Sustain open source, I think it was like the first Sustain or the second one. There was a project that came out of that that wanted to do like some sort of like corporate sponsorship, right, where we would like track all the corporate contributions to open source. So a lot of companies want to do it. I don't think that there is like, well, maybe not all, but some companies want to do it, and I don't think there is like I don't want to be transparent aspect to it. There's like an aspect to it that is very messy, right? Which take Google, right? Google like does open source themselves. They fund open source via Open Collective. They fund open source via like they fund open source institutions like Linux Foundation, which is not project directed funding, but it's like institutional funding. They hire developers to work on open source projects, right? So it's also like a complicated like mesh of like funding. And so Open Collective itself as a platform, we are not ready to show all of that transparently, because we are at the core, we are a ledger. We show the transactions that happen. We don't show transactions that don't happen, right? And we don't know. We don't have like the compliance tooling, and certainly Linux is not going to want to collaborate. LF like certainly won't want to collaborate with us in showing their numbers, right? Because there's not a lot of appetite for transparency there. And so, I mean, we do what we can. We would love to see more of this. We would love to see something like the open source, like corporate, open source sustainability index or open source funding index to take place. Some companies are, they also don't want to be super public about it, because they always get called out on how small their contributions are, which, like, screw them. They should do better. But it's there's also like a reality where, like, we also do not want to antagonize like the funding that some of the projects are getting by going out super hard against companies that should be giving more, right? I think it has to be like, there should be like a standard, an industry standard to what it means being a good corporate open source citizen, right? Like in the same way there is a standard for, and it's a bit battered, but like, what is a standard for, sustainable companies or fair trade companies, or we should also have like a standard for what it means to be a good corporate citizen. And that is like an industry wide kind of effort that I think would really make a lot of progress towards the goal that you are bringing up, that I think is like, it should be the norm, right? We should all show that very clearly. So one thing that we've been trying to do is to create open source funds inside of the open source collective. And so an open source fund essentially is where, again, Chrome says like, okay, I'm going to give you $2 million for this year. We're going to put it in this fund. And then from here, we're going to give funding to collectives, but we're also going to give funding to other organizations, right? Because the pitch to them is like, look, it's a lot easier for you to cut a $2 million check with one procurement process and one purchasing order to a nonprofit, than to turn around and having to give $5,000 here, 20 here, etc. Right? So we'll manage the fund for you, and then we can spread that out a lot more efficiently and a lot faster, right? And so by growing the funds, that is something that we've been growing a lot year on year. By growing the funds, we're also growing like the place where open source contributions happen. And so we can show that transparently, because everything that happens on the Open Collective platform is transparent. And so we are trying to make it easier for them to give money, make it more efficient. And in the process of doing that, like making them more transparent.
So I was actually thinking as he was asking the question that he said like open collectives will be that central place, let's say this place where everything happens there. But I'm going to challenge this vision a little bit, because because if that happens, then so you said before, like Open Collective is a company, it's an Inc. in the US. So after all, then it will be a monopoly situation where Open Collective has all the power, and all the power is centralized in a single place by a few, like led by a few people and so on.
So they never ask. We do not give board seats to anyone, and no one asked us in the open source collective for a board seat, and we would say yes in any case.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So that's the thing, that these kind of things could happen, right? Like you can change your mind, or you can simply, I don't know, something can happen to you. I wish that nothing bad happens to you, but this can happen. But but this can happen, and then other people can take over, and then the vision is not the same anymore, and so on. So because it's a company after all, and all the power resides in a single company. So, and in a few people, I mean, right? So, and I think that's a good topic to finish, probably, which is that takes me to exit to
Yeah.
community.
Yeah.
So, can you explain a little bit more what is
I
it
mean,
about? Like,
yeah, sure. And, that is exactly why you are thinking about this, right? Um, Ultimately, we wouldn't be different from Facebook if the technology that communities are using to sustaining themselves was in the hand of like a few people, right? Namely the team, myself, our investors, right? Even if like we are not holding the money is held by the nonprofit, right? We are still like running the platform, right? And we are lucky enough that Open Collective Inc. is sustainable itself, and we don't have board seats because we don't give board seats anywhere, not even in our company. But so we investors don't control the company, etc. Right? So we're very lucky, and in that regard. But at the same time, it is a reality that the infrastructure that these communities are using is in privately held hands, and that what we're doing is infrastructure for the commons, and so we feel like the commons should own the technology that it uses, right, to support itself.
Mhm.
And so the question now is like, how on earth do we make that happen, right? How on earth do we transfer a privately owned like corporation from the current cap table to the community, right? And who is the community? Because the Open Collective community, that's another question, right? Like it's like thousands of collectives, like many thousands of collectives, many thousands of donors, 380 nonprofits, right? So it's like a big network of madness. And so how do we organize that? That is E2C, it's exit to community. Traditionally, as a company that has private capital, like venture capital funding, has two paths for exiting, right? And giving, I mean, you have a couple of options. You can sell the company, which is what most startups like try to do, get acquired, which is what GitHub did, right? So they get acquired by Microsoft, for example, but then it's like Microsoft rules. And sure, now Microsoft is lovely, right? But open source was the evil, for them, or, it was a cancer for them not so long ago. So, and there is no control. Like the community doesn't have any control about like what happens if the new corporation decides that, oh, we're just going to sunset this feature because it doesn't make money, and it's the thing that is keeping communities going, right? You have no control over that. But that's one path. The other path is like IPO, go public via an IPO, but that requires like a hyper growth trajectory that we are not on. We've never focused on hyper growth. I don't even like the idea of like anything that is hyper growth. I think that is not healthy. So that's not what's happening here, and it won't be, right. It's not the type of company that we build. And so what do we do? And so exit to community is a way for the community to, in a way, buy Open Collective of the current owners, if you want, to buy the shares. So there's a gazillion ways of doing that. None of them have proven yet, but or none of them are easy. But essentially, it's like, via a trust that slowly purchases the shares from employees, investors, founders to the trust, and then that trust has a mandate, that the mandate is to preserve the mission of Open Collective. And so they are essentially the ultimate owners, and they hold these shares in the name of the community, and there are governance mechanisms for the community to participate in kind of the strategy and vision and path forward. That's one option. Another option is to do a DAO and turn shares into tokens and distribute tokens. Another option is to build a co-op, right, to transform Open Collective into like some sort of global co-op of, I don't know, folks around the world. So yeah, that's what we're thinking. That's the path we're in. We want to figure out a mechanism to transfer ownership to the community, and distribute revenue with the community, in a way that is fair and more or less sane. And that's what we're doing. That's C2C.
That is really, I mean, that's amazing. Like when I first read about it, I think it's from a guy from uh, Colorado University or something like
Oh yeah,
that.
Nathan Schneider. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I first read it, I mean, it was I saw it on Open Collective, and then I kept investigating, and I was like, of course, like why nobody thought about it before?
Yeah,
Probably because it's complicated.
it's
It
complicated.
is.
No, it's complicated.
It
It's
is.
even more complicated with a project like Open Collective that like
Yeah.
is like spanned around the world, right? And
Yeah.
also that the community is a combination of non-entities like collectives, right? Like non-legal entities, individuals, donors, non-for-profits, right? So it has very
Yeah.
difficult, very diverse stakeholders. That's what makes it so beautiful, right? But at the same time, it's like hard to articulate an exit to community that takes
Yeah.
into account the whole span of it, right?
Yeah, you were mentioning co-ops as well, and immediately the first thought was like, yeah, co-op where, in which country, right?
Exactly.
And then
Exactly.
it's like, in all of them, are you gonna manage like
Yeah.
I don't know, like hundreds or thousands of co-ops around the world?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to be there. I don't want to be the person
Exactly.
doing that, right?
And
So
also,
that's
like, that's why, a DAO is appealing because it doesn't have
yeah,
that territorial kind of
yes,
component, but at the same time, it has like a lot of complexity, and it's like a technical kind of barrier for a lot of people. And
yes,
and it's in the crypto space, which half of our community hates viscerally. And so, like, so I like trusts a lot, but like a perpetual purpose trust it's a really cool structure, I think, that we can use. But then the governance of that is like it's
but
messy.
a trust, if I'm not mistaken, is bound to a specific country as well, right?
Yes, but you can have like the board of trustees or an oversee, like you can issue shares to people in different countries as well, right? But
Hmm.
how are you gonna who are you gonna issue shares to? The trust owns the
Yes,
shares, and then the community owns the trust or is the beneficiary of the trust. And so there might be like this decoupling of you know governance kind of rights, if you want, and revenue shared rights, or maybe they're the same. It's all a big, like, at this stage I have more questions than answers,
yeah,
but there is something forming in here that it's super exciting because it hasn't been done, and if we more or less get this right, um, it's a great template for other companies to think
yes,
creatively about
exactly.
how they can exit to their communities or how they can involve their communities in the ownership, revenue distribution, and governance of like the projects, right? Because we are a community for, like, we don't exist without, like, it doesn't make sense that the community is different from the company, right? Because it's
Yeah.
kind of, it serves that community. So yeah.
No, no, completely agree. And you're gonna, if you even make it work like briefly or just not completely perfect and so on, you're gonna come up with a lot of processes and tools and governance tools that are gonna be helpful for the next person or company that who will want to do it, and they will improve them and so on. So yeah, you'll set the base for a a better future for sure.
Yeah,
For
it's
sure.
not going to be perfect. That we
No,
know.
no, of
It's
course
not going
not.
to be perfect.
I mean IPO and
Yeah.
and all these things that have been around for a while already are still not perfect.
Yeah.
So yeah, who cares if it's not perfect? Like if we only consume perfect things, then we will not be consuming anything because yeah, what's perfection
Exactly.
after all? So yeah. Um, Well, we're over time already. I really want to thank you a lot for joining us and giving us this opportunity um, to talk to you and to hear from you all these stories, because I think they're pretty useful and pretty needed. We're always speaking about technologies and code and so on, but I think these things are actually pretty important, and we as developers tend to avoid having conversations about it. And that, which is normal, like we dedicate to code, and like we said before, right? And so yeah, I think it's pretty cool that developers all around the world get to hear um, from you and from the Open Collective team what you're doing and what's next about it. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Cool. Thank
I
you for having
really
me,
appreciate
for
it. No
listening
problem.
to me rant.
No problem. We like to rant here on Thinking Out Loud. So actually, that's actually the purpose of this, right? The purpose of this format is that we just jump here and we don't know what's going to happen. I only had a few, for the first time, by the way, pre-recorded questions, or and that's the only thing that is prepared beforehand. But the rest is just free flow. We don't know what's going to happen. So yeah,
Great.
I like it. Cool, Pia. Thanks a lot. And yeah, if you want to say something else before
No, I think I
before
said
we end.
enough. Just we're around. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you for being part of this journey.
no problem. Thank you. See you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.